Good afternoon to all the participants on this webinar and a very happy Diwali. Thank you for joining us for the October 2020 investor update of the SATCO Capital Market Growth and Momentum Strategy. Our investment committee member, Mr. Nitin Raheja, will now take us through the presentation.
Good afternoon, everybody. At the outset, let me wish all of you a very, very happy Diwali to you and all your family. And more importantly, a very, very safe Diwali to you. So once again, we come to you with our monthly update. It's at a time where, we are celebrating Diwali like we have never done in our lives in a very, very different way. Also, we have seen markets extremely buoyant, much against popular opinion and expectations. So it's been a very, very unusual 7 months in the year so far. And who knows what we are going to see going ahead. In such a scenario, I thought we would, tell you what our view and take is, talk to you a little bit about our portfolio and how the companies in our portfolio have performed and how we see the way ahead as such. So, quickly diving into the presentation out here. As you can see, at the beginning of the year when COVID, erupted, everybody had an opinion in terms of how they saw the markets going ahead. Everybody talked about, if you see, Goldman Sachs talked about a Nifty target of 10,800 by March end, Morgan Stanley, and these are all very well established, well reputed broking houses who have been around for decades and centuries at time. And almost everybody seems to have got it wrong in terms of their forecasting. Even the IMF and the World Bank have got it wrong because we are in an event which is a once in a 100-year event. The last pandemic that we had was in the 1920s as such, and now we have had the COVID pandemic. So in terms of the impact that it would have on GDP, on growth, on corporate earnings, on the overall economy, I think everybody was using models that they have traditionally worked with and trying to forecast. And I think it has been basically a forecaster's nightmare without fail. So against all these so-called dire forecasts, what do we see? We see in India a situation where we've had bountiful monsoons. I mean, they're probably one of some of the best monsoons that we've had in a very long time. And more importantly, spatially, they've been well distributed across the country to the extent that storage reservoir levels are, as you can see, at very, very high levels at the present moment. The Kharif crop production is expected to be extremely buoyant. And this is all manifest in the form of tractor sales being extremely buoyant in the agriculture economy. Industrial production has come back very strongly. In fact, to be very honest, even I have been very surprised by these numbers from a perspective. If you look at the manufacturing PMI, okay, manufacturing PMI essentially reflects the factory output data or an industrial output data. Manufacturing PMI, which had gone all the way down in April, has now bounced back to a level of almost 58.9. Mind you, it's not that it has just come back over the levels that it was in February. It's at a decade high as such. Now, arguably, there is a trend of thought that was that probably because of the entire destocking of the channels and in anticipation of festival demand, all manufacturing in the factories have ramped up just to stock the channel back in. However, anecdotally, when we talk to dealers and we talk to people in the chain, they all are extremely averse to sitting on stocks. So it's not a case that stock has moved from factories into the supply chains or distribution chains. it's essentially been demand which has been buoyant, and that's also manifest in the fact that if you look at Amazon, they've talked of a record sales that they have seen for their online, shopping festival as such that is currently going on. However, manufacturing yet accounts for only 15 to 16% of our GDP. So when manufacturing is doing very well, it arguably its contribution to GDP is not yet going to manifest in a major way because we are a services dominated economy. Almost 65% of our economy comprises services. So that is one, if you remember the last call also, I talked about this facet that the services PMI number had continued to be low. To my pleasant surprise, if I take the month of October, the services PMI has risen to 54.1. It was about 47 last month. Now that is a very, very pleasant, and as you will see that it only seems to be on an uptrend as far as growth is concerned. Now, considering that services employs a huge population of our country, that's a very, very positive sign for services to come back. And now, as as hotels open up, as restaurants open up, as travel starts happening, I think that will come back faster and faster. So it seems to me at the present moment, much against everybody's expectation, IIP is doing well, services is starting to come back, agriculture is doing well. So all three legs of the economy seems to be firing quite well. And that is also manifest in the fact that if you were to look at some high frequency indicators, and just to sort of open this up, high frequency indicators are indicators that we get whether it's in the form of GST collection. GST collection, as you can see, has almost come back to the level that it was just around Feb, March as such, and is growing month on month as such. So GST is showing a positive uptrend. The ETC count and collection, that is exhibiting what sort of movement of goods is happening across the country, is also showing a month on month growth and uptrend, and is almost back to March, and in fact higher than March levels. In fact, if you see the collection, it is higher than pre-COVID levels for both of these indicators, which means goods are moving across the country, which is a very positive sign. Again, if you see power is again higher than pre-COVID levels. Now, all of this seems to sort of indicate that much against the bigger fears that we had, that what will happen, and it was all gloom and boom, the economy seems to have come back very strongly. And India has also been helped by the fact that crude oil has remained benign. We are a large importer of crude, and all through this period we've actually maintained a current account surplus on our trade account, and that has been a big surprise, and has also been one of the reasons why the rupee has been relatively resilient even during these turmoil and torrid times as such. Again, further fact aiding the rupee has been the ability of corporate India to go out there and strike deals and bring in capital. We've seen Reliance do that. We've seen all the top banks do that. And now a lot of mid-tier corporates are also starting to do the same thing. All of that has meant that whether it's been foreign direct investment into the country, or whether it has been portfolio investment, both of them have been fairly resilient. And in fact, in this month, the kind of FPI numbers or foreign portfolio numbers has been absolutely astounding in this first week of this month that has gone by, and that has possibly contributed to the market, going up so sharply the way it has as such. So now, now, what does that mean from a corporate perspective? So we looked at the numbers of the CNX 500, which is our index, of the 500 companies. The 305 companies have declared their numbers so far. Uh, this is the H1 numbers. So mind you, it shows in the form of Q1 numbers, which were very weak and which were negative. But overall, it has been minus 20%. The EBITDA growth has been minus 4%, which is, if you consider that Q1 was so bad when we were in the lockdown, Q2 that means has been so good that it has come back and it is only minus 4%. And PBT growth or profit growth has actually been a positive 4%. So despite worst fears, corporates and corporate India has held out very well and has shown extreme resilience during this period. In light of this, as I mentioned, let me just now jump into telling you about how our portfolios have behaved in this last few months, and more specifically in the last 1 month. As I mentioned to you in the last couple of calls that we have been doing, we've really not done a lot in terms of changing our strategy, in terms of changing our model portfolio. We had positioned our portfolio, if you remember, just when COVID erupted. At that was a time where we made a lot of changes and created what we believe was a COVID-proof portfolio as such. We have stuck to our knitting in that because we believe this is a portfolio which comprises winners and which will have immense capability of generating both returns for investors and profit growth for these companies that they're doing. So we've continued to hold our top allocations as a part of the COVID proofing of the portfolio to pharmaceuticals, where we own almost 11.5% as such, and agrochemicals, which reflects the resilience of the agro sector at 8%. Telecom was an addition, which last month, if you remember, is something that was impacting us due to the sharp fall in Bharti's price as such. However, we believe that that fall was more driven by sentiment and technical factors. For example, the weightage of Bharti in the MSCI index. All of that has settled down, and in fact, in the recent past, from its low of 400, Bharti has almost bounced back 20%. So so that has come back very well for us. Gas has been our favorite, and that within gas, basically city gas distribution companies has been our favorite holding. We've been holding on to this for the last couple of years and have only increased our weightage systematically over a period of time. Even today, gas accounts for close to roughly around 9% of our portfolio, and as we talk, we've increased it further in the current month. That's because we believe that clean fuel is here to stay. Clean fuel is the future of the country, and in fact, the entire direction of the country has been towards setting up of a gas grid pipeline all across, which is, just the other day we were hearing a CRISIL call which talked about the fact that there is yet almost double of the current capacity that is needed and which is being planned for the next few years. We continue to hold our weightage of gold at where it is. We raised a little bit of cash in the portfolios in the run-up to the US election because we were expecting some amount of volatility. We were proven wrong, to be honest, because despite the result being a close call, the markets were extremely buoyant and did very well during this period. But we had raised about close to 10% of cash in our books, which we have been slowly deploying, not in a hurry. We reduced our weightages to a couple of companies and removed them from our portfolio. One of them was Insecticides India, an agrochemical company, but someone who has did not deliver in the Q1 numbers. And on our tracking and looking at the channels, we expected that the results would again disappoint, and we were proved right. And so we had sort of exited before that. The other company we exited was Privi Specialty Chemicals, which is in the flavors and fragrances space. This company will do very well going ahead. However, it is going through a short tenure of maybe the next 6-8 months where the results are going to be very tepid and you're not going to see growth. And as you know, we are primarily being growth investors. So we trimmed our positions in these two companies. We also did a little bit of profit booking across our list of companies wherein we had seen big run-ups happening. On financials, we continue to own 17%. In fact, in the current month, we've increased our weightage to financials. And I will talk about our view on financials as we go ahead in the presentation. And our bottom-up focus companies have continued to do well, whether it has been a Vaibhav Global, which has sort of performed, or a Polycab, which did very, very well this month. Apollo Tricoat and APL Apollo Tubes. All of these companies have done exceedingly well in terms of their numbers and results, and it's reflected in their stock prices. If I have to look at the last month, our portfolio went up by 1.1%. I mean, after almost 5 or 6 months of consistently beating the CNX 500 by a fair degree, last month we were almost in line with the index. Index did about 2% odd. We were at 1.1. That's because the financials did extremely well last month, and financials are almost 35% of the index, while in our case we had trimmed it down to 17%, as I was discussing with you earlier. But however, which are some, and as can be seen, some of the stocks which gave us a positive attribution in performance was Kotak, HDFC Bank, ICICI, and of course Polycab, which did very well. Our laggards were UPL, which dragged our performance down, GMM Pfaudler, IOL, and Deepak Nitrite. However, in all of these companies, we believe we have some very good stories playing out, very strong stories playing out, and we believe valuations are yet very, very favorable in these companies. Incidentally, some of them have also come back strongly in this month as such. If I were to run you through how the companies in our portfolio have done during this second quarter, we have shown, our companies have shown some exceptional numbers. If you take our non-financial companies, on an average, they grew their revenue by 15%, which is tremendous in my view, in an economy which is just recovering as such. Our profit and operating growth was almost 41%, and our earnings growth was 31.7%. So, the entire thesis that we have carried all along, that we will invest in high growth quality businesses which will double their profits every 4 years, continues to hold its weight out here. As you can see, as an overall, if I talk to you about doubling profits in every 4 years, it basically means these companies should be growing their profits at 19.5% compounded. These numbers are far higher than that. So we are extremely confident about each of our companies, even the companies which have temporarily shown some negative degrowth. We continue to be extremely confident about their prospects going ahead. If I have to further come down to the financials in our portfolio, the financials in our portfolio have shown a net interest income growth of almost 17%, and the PAT growth has been 113%. Again, if you remember, our thesis on financials was we want to be with the market leaders. We see a consolidation happening in the sector, and we want to be with companies who have very strong balance sheets. In our view, if anybody can come and show us better financials than these 6 companies within the private banks and NBFCs, in terms of the size of business, in terms of quality of management, I would be most happy to listen to them, and definitely look at those companies with it. But we believe we have the 6 best financial companies in our portfolio. Now, just as I do every month, sometimes we talk about some stocks in our portfolio. I decided that we would talk about our take on the financial sector. The financial sector is a very important sector in our economy and even our markets. Typically, the financial sector has a weightage of over 35%. It permeates every part of our life and business as such. And so the health of the financial sector and how the financial sector does is very, very important. And that is also the obsession of the RBI and the government. So when we started the COVID crisis, there was all sorts of fear that was manifest. In fact, the initial estimates at the pandemic said that for all the commercial banks, the scheduled commercial banks, the GNPA ratio would jump from 8.5, and GNPA is gross non-performing asset for some of our listeners, would jump from 8.5% to 12.5%, which is almost 1.5x, and 14.7% depending on macro stress by March. And within that, the PSBs, which is the public sector banks, which have high NPAs, would actually jump 35% from 11.3 to 15.2 and 16.2. Now, this is all very worrying, and this actually saw a massive sell-off take place in the financial sector. In fact, on an average, financial stocks lost anywhere from a minimum of 30-35% to a maximum of 60-70% also. And I'm only talking of the bigger and the well-known names. Some of the smaller ones, I don't know how much they would have even gone further. So, so there was immense fear on A, the quality of their books, B, on their capital adequacy, on their ability to carry on business as going concerns, which is what resulted. In fact, the capital adequacy ratio was expected to fall from 14.6% to, in a more severe case, to almost 12 to 11.8%, which would have meant that they would have needed to come into the market and raise large amounts of capital, or they wouldn't have been able to grow from here forth. So fears on growth, fears on led by low capital, fears on high credit costs or high NPAs, all led to this massive sell-off. However, let's look at what happened to the surprise. Now, if you take the Q2 numbers, the private banks have actually grown their net interest income book by 12% during this period, which is extremely good, considering that overall credit growth has only been around 7-8%. Deposit growth has been 6.5%, and their GNPAs have gone to 6.11%. Against, if I were to take you in a slide earlier, where they talked about the GNPAs going as high as 8.7%. So the incremental rise in GNPA has been to the extent of 2%, roughly. And capital adequacy has been 17% for these banks. So they all were very smart, and they had either raised capital prior to COVID, or just at the beginning of COVID, they went and raised capital. The public sector banks also grew their NIIs very strongly, but it came on a low base of last year. They saw a huge deposit growth. They saw a huge deposit growth because at such times people rush to safety, and COVID was there, the Yes Bank crisis was there, so everybody went and parked their money with public sector banks from mutual funds and elsewhere, because there was fear palpable. So they grew the deposits at a far higher number. The GNPAs have also remained very high, so at 11.39%. So, and capital adequacy at 12.78 means that they are very close to the fears that were being expressed by or expected by the overall market in terms of their growth going ahead. If you take some of the largest banks and the kind of banks that we look to invest in, and we talked about, and we already own 3 or 4 of them in our portfolio, you would see that all of them grew their NII book, NIIs in high double digits as such. Anywhere between 15 to 20% is what all of them grew their books. Uh, all of them had very strong deposit growth rates also taking place as such. And credit cost, of course, if you take HDFC Bank at 1.5% against, if you remember the mean in that I showed you in the earlier slide, which was roughly around, if you can see, 6% for private banks and 3.5% for the top 6. So almost half of what the top 6 banks have declared. And that's the reason HDFC Bank trades at what it trades at, the kind of premium it gets. GNPA is at 1%. So as you can see, whether it's an HDFC Bank, whether it's an HDFC, whether it's a Kotak Bank, all have done a couple of things. They've front-loaded their credit costs by writing off all possible bad loans early, and they have sort of continued to grow based on strong deposit inflows as such. As you can see in this, the 3 banks who have the highest GNPAs are State Bank, ICICI Bank, and Axis Bank. And this is by virtue of the fact that these banks in the past had an exposure to very large corporate books, and but which they have been cleaning up over a period of time. And but simultaneously, if you really look and you see at all the private banks, whether it's an HDFC Bank, it's a Kotak Bank, it's an ICICI Bank, or it's an Axis Bank, they all raised capital preemptively, even an IndusInd Bank or a Bandhan Bank, and they all are sitting on capital adequacy ratios close to 20%, which means that when the economy is running full steam after this and growth is there, these banks are going to go out there and capture market share at the cost of public sector banks. Collection efficiency, much against popular expectation, as of September has been close to 95, 96%. So it seems that the worst fears of people as far as financials are concerned have not borne out the way people were thinking. So what has been the current reality? If I have to sum this up, smart banks went and raised capital preemptively in the early stages of the pandemic. Deposit accretion and focus on increasing their franchisee on the ground has seen them garner market share. Most of the large lenders front-loaded all their credit costs in a conservative manner. Collection efficiency has been highest. So if you were to ask me which are the kind of financials one should be investing in, my point would be to you investors is look for banks who have raised capital and are sitting on strong CAR ratios. Look for banks who have front-loaded their credit costs and have very high collection efficiencies at play. So in our view, if I were to tell you our philosophy and our investment thesis towards the financial sector is large and well-capitalized private banks and NBFCs have adequate capital and will gain further market share at the cost of weaker private banks, further creating consolidation, and we want to sit in these market leaders as such. Coming to our portfolio performance, as we have shared, in the year to date in 2020, and I'm talking about Jan till now, we are up 18.6% as of end of the October against the market, which is down minus 2.9%. So it's now been almost in 8 of the 9 years, we have consistently outperformed markets and by a huge and a fair degree as such. All of this has meant that from 2012 till now, we have returned 819% in terms of our portfolio returns, or a 28.5% compounded annual return for investors, with a huge outperformance as far as the Nifty is concerned. as such. So that's it from me in terms of the monthly update, and I would be open to questions now.
Thanks, Nitin, for that insightful presentation. One of the questions that we've gotten is with the Pfizer vaccine news coming in on Monday, we saw a lot of COVID stocks, which were the hype stocks of COVID reversing. And what do you feel that how is that going to play out?
So look, markets are going to have their fads from time to time. Okay. In my view, there will be, what that basically means is that people will say that, look, the economy is going to go back to normal, things are going to normal, so let's go back and look at normal stocks. And some of them were beaten down, and so you will see some rotation happening there from time to time. However, if you take the businesses that we have invested in, so we called it a COVID-proof portfolio only from a perspective that when the market would come back or the economy would open from a lockdown, these businesses would come back first. But besides coming back first, these businesses were doing well even while getting into COVID. And when COVID comes out, these businesses have long runways of growth. So take, for example, the pharmaceutical business. The pharmaceutical business is not a COVID beneficiary. It's a beneficiary because of the fact that people are de-risking from China. It's a beneficiary because India has chemical skills and is now being looked upon as an API manufacturing zone. So pharmaceuticals has a long runway of growth going ahead, and it's not got anything to do with COVID. So when I talk about investing in companies which are going to double their profits in 4 years, what we are saying is we want companies who have visibility as far as their business models are concerned, visibility as far as their earnings are concerned, and a management who has the ability to be able to use opportunities to grow. So whether it's that, or you take agrochemicals, which is purely an India story based upon the strong rural and agriculture sector, or gas, and so on and so forth. So we continue to believe that the businesses that we own are on a growth path and will do well, COVID or no COVID. No COVID will accelerate them further. Now, from time to time, markets will see sector rotation take place. We might get some sectors, we might not get some sectors. Ultimately, we invest in what we understand.
Right. Nitin, we have a next question coming in from Mr. Kulkarni. The question reads, we are comparing the current market with the pre-COVID level and can understand if this was the same level, but the overall economic pointers before the March crash were not good. So basically what Mr. Kulkarni is saying that the economic indicators pre-COVID were not doing that well, but now market is at all-time high. Is this a temporary celebration for overcoming COVID, or there's real growth as compared to where we were pre-COVID?
So I don't think there is a celebration for overcoming COVID. Frankly speaking, markets were on a tear over the last 3 or 4 months, even when there was no talk of this vaccine which came up and so on and so forth. I think markets were, let's understand one simple thing. You're right that the economy was struggling. We were growing at hardly 5%, which is a far cry from the 7-8% growth that we had seen in the earlier years as such. And the economy was struggling. Now, those fundamental factors will remain in place till there are a lot of other structural reforms that take place. But don't forget that during this period, the government has taken some, there are 2 big factors that have changed, right? One is inflation has, been benign. Second is interest rates have dropped to record lows of many years. And the impact of low interest rates, I mean, you can talk to someone who's going to buy an apartment when he has to pay an EMI for 15 years and 20 years, and he sees what that means from a mortgage rate perspective, or if you're buying an auto loan. So low interest rates, and also for corporates who are looking to invest in capital equipment, which we are not seeing yet, but which could happen given the kind of capacity that they're running at, right? So I think low interest rates are a huge factor in the economy. This is the kind of rates which were not there when we got into COVID. A. B. During this period, the government has done a lot of steps in terms of putting money into the hands of some of the poor people or people on the rural front, as well as the whole agriculture reforms which they have tried to sort of do, and which are facing resistance on individual state level and so on and so forth. Now, when you see the impact of all of that happening, it could be completely different going ahead. So, sorry, I think I got muted. So yes, I take your point that the economy was not doing well any which way, but maybe that is what has prompted this whole reform. If you were talking of when we were for example when we got into COVID, a consensus view would have been there interest rates are not going down further from there, given what inflation was trading at. But interest rates have gone down, deposit rates have gone down tremendously, and so on and so forth. So all of this has also meant money flowing into equities as an asset class being attractive. Further, sometimes you probably need a crisis to get re-galvanize people and come back with vengeance to work and business and so on and so forth. So yes, of course, you will need many more reforms to come for the momentum to keep on sustaining going ahead. But also don't forget, even when we were entering that, last couple of years has been a bottom-up stock pickers market. It's not been a market when you take overall this thing. And so hence our belief is we should not obsess ourselves too much with markets. We should focus on the stocks that we hold in our portfolios. We should focus on how those companies are doing, how those managements are performing, because wealth is being created irrespective of where markets are.
Right, Nitin. The next question is on GMM Pfaudler. There are two related questions. What are the prospects of GMM Pfaudler? And the second question is, what is the 2 to 3 month prospect for GMM Pfaudler?
So let me give an opportunity to my colleague Varun to tell you about it, because he actively monitors and tracks it for me. Varun, would you like to give your 2 bits on GMM Pfaudler?
Yeah, hi. Sorry. So GMM Pfaudler, why we like the story is that what we've seen is from this year, after the consolidation happens, over the next 3 or 4 years, through a series of synergies coming through and them expanding their market reach and consolidating their markets, their operating profits would grow at about close to 20% year on year, which falls right within our doubling the earnings over a period of 4 to 5 years. That's the first thing. The second reason we like the company is because what we've noticed is that the technology which they have is, to some extent, it is a moat. There is some moat. It is not very easy for someone else to come in and take over those markets, either in terms of technology or in terms of quality. I cannot tell you what the performance will be over 3 months, as one of the participants was asking, but it definitely fits into our long-term strategy.
So let me just interject here. I think Varun is being very modest. I think the performance over the 3 months is also going to be extremely well in terms of their fundamental performance. For the simple reason, as Varun was enumerating, GMM Pfaudler is a market leader in the segment that it operates, which is glass line reactors. They have a 50% plus market share in India, which is going to go to 65%. They have a Varun, correct me if I'm wrong, a 30% plus market share globally as such.
It will be closer to 50% globally. I mean, there's a French company and there's the US company, Standard Glass, but yeah, they're probably at 50, close to 50%.
And
Totally.
and if you were to go and talk to anybody in the pharmaceutical and the chemical space, which is seeing capital expenditure, and ask them what is their first choice for glass line reactors, they will tell you GMM Pfaudler. The only reason they don't go to GM, and in fact, all the big ones, the well-established names are all GMM Pfaudler. So GMM Pfaudler is a quasi play on pharma and pharma, agrochemicals, and the specialty chemical business in India. A market leader. Yes, there has been some turmoil in the stock, which has happened in the last 1 month related to the placement that was made by promoters. Indian promoters made a small placement. It was really the global private equity fund which placed the stock. But the results of this quarter have been extraordinary. Varun, would you share the numbers, please, in terms of the profit growth and top line growth?
Sure, sure.
So we continue to remain very, very positive and bullish on GMM Pfaudler and see that as a stock which has a long runway of growth and profitability.
Right. This quarter, what GMM Pfaudler did was they had close to a 22% revenue growth. They had a 29% operating profit growth and a 29% earnings growth.
Yeah.
We could see the consolidation come in from the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
As I just like to add, we try and get into the products which our companies make. What we've noticed is that GMM is the market leader in anti-corrosive equipment, and they are just continuously increasing their offering to the market. What they manufacture is usually very critical equipment. So I cannot afford to have a breakdown. I cannot afford to have my process machinery fail, which is why I would see customers going to GMM Pfaudler because of the just the quality of the equipment, the delivery efficiency of the equipment. I'm assured that my product will last for as long as I think it's a 7 to 8 year replacement cycle. So I'm assured that I should not have too many issues or any issues through the entire cycle.
Sure. Yep. Yeah.
Thanks, Varun and Nitin, for that.
Yeah.
Nitin, the next question is from Mr. Vemuri.
Yep.
There's a lot of exuberance in the market across the world.
Yep.
What do you foresee as risks to our economy and to the market in the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah. So look, Mr. Vemuri, you're absolutely right. There is a lot of exuberance in the markets. And of course, as in our earlier presentation, we had highlighted that this exuberance has been led by the fact that we are at an unprecedented stage where, the US economy or the US interest rates are close to zero or, could be even getting into negative territory as such. All of this has meant that there has been a sort of people looking for returns. And so risk assets have seen a higher allocation happen. And within that, equities has seen a lot of money pour in. Now, how would it impact us from a risk perspective? I think, well, markets could correct, but I doubt, to be honest, my own view is that if I look at things here, I don't see if the US Fed says for the next 2 years, I'm going to keep interest rates at this level. And money is available at 0% and so on and so forth. What could puncture the bubble? Okay. In my view, if you ask me, and frankly speaking, like my first slide talked about, forecasting has been a very hazardous profession and got people wrong. But if I were to look at it from one perspective, I think easy money policy is here for some time till the economies come back to their original levels of growth and stress is out. In that period, you will see easy money and money towards equity remaining benign. However, if all this easy money does not see growth coming back, at some stage you could see money moving out of equities on a selective basis where valuations become unheard of. But now, it's a unique scenario which we've never been in, where if theoretically, if I were to tell you that money costs 10%, interest rates are 10%, and you have a 10 PE on that, to correspond that to a bond, right? Now, if money is costing zero, PE is infinite from that perspective. So yes, this exuberance could continue. You will have from time to time nervousness in markets. You could have 10% kind of corrections take place in markets, which is par for the course. Every bull market has those kind of corrections. And when those happen, stocks could correct much more, 15%, 20%, and which is what is normally that we have seen happening. However, it is our view, and it has been, if you see our older presentation where we had highlighted companies, a lot of our time and energy in a lot of our meetings goes in talking about markets. Oh, well, markets are exuberant, look at the index. But honestly, except if you're a trader, and I don't know whether this forum, anybody is you could be a trader, but this is a PMS forum where we're looking at investments. Unless you're a trader, in buying a Nifty or a contract or a bank Nifty contract, most of the people out here are here for investing in stocks. So all our empirical studies which we have done and which we shared in the last few seminars has shown that if you're invested in companies who are growing at 15% plus CAGR, who have ROCs of 20% plus, you're going to be okay through this volatility. Then you need not be bothered about volatility, because these are the type of companies who have shown consistent compounded returns over a period of time, and even through volatile periods.
Right. Nitin, what is your view on financials ex banks? We spoke about banks at length.
You're talking of NBFCs.
NBFCs, insurance,
yeah,
AMC.
So we like the insurance space. We like the life insurance space. Within that, we have there are three companies which are listed. As you know, HDFC Life, ICICI Life, and SBI Life. We have SBI Life in our portfolio because we think from a growth value proposition, it looks the best position. HDFC Life trades at a substantial premium. ICICI trades at a discount. But if you look at the numbers of SBI Life in relation to its premium income, in relation to the size of its book, in relation to the profitability, it compares almost on par with HDFC, but it trades at a substantial discount to HDFC. So we own SBI Life. We like that space. We think India is an underpenetrated insurance market. It has a long runway of growth ahead of it. On the NBFC space, we think that a consolidation is going to happen. The NBFC boom that we saw prior to 2018 is not going to happen in a hurry any longer. Some of the small NBFCs, some of the mid-sized NBFCs are going to struggle. They are not going to be able to raise capital at competitive prices, which means at the prices at which they will raise capital, they'll have to take risk on their books to make a good return on equity for the investors. So we prefer the large, well-established. So if you have to break up the NBFC basket, so if you take the mortgage space, we think the mortgage space is going to consolidate, and the big are going to get bigger. Helped by the fact that Diwan is out of the market, India Bulls has been struggling. So we think HDFC and LIC are going to garner more market share. HDFC is a better run and well-managed company. We see it will continue to grow its market share and do very well. We like the gold loan NBFCs. Gold is at its all-time high. We don't own any of that. I must admit that we sort of missed the entire rally in gold loan companies during the COVID period. But we like that space. We like companies like Bajaj Finance who are quasi banks and who have also, if you see the numbers, have grown their deposit franchise very aggressively, vis-a-vis banks and so on and so forth, and who have invested very strongly in technology. And so as Bajaj has built a book size and invested in technology, and to the extent that today in the CP market, it raises money at extremely competitive rates, even better than a lot of the banks. So it has sort of negated the disadvantage it has of not being a bank. So we like the larger ones, and we would prefer to consolidate ourselves. We think they will do well and have, again, as I said, a long road ahead of them.
Thanks, Nitin. That was the last question. I invite the management for their closing comments.
Good evening, friends. Nice to be interacting with all of you, and I'm very heartened that so many of you attended today's meeting. I think that was a very insightful presentation from Nitin and his whole team. Friends, you must have seen, a lot of hard work goes into the kind of research that Nitin and his boys do. They really go in depth into every company and attend management calls, make visits. Of course, lockdown has prevented them from visiting plants, but they have been doing that. And that is the reason that this PMS has shown phenomenal growth. Last Diwali to this Diwali, I was just seeing the data. We have grown 24%, while the S&P 500 and Nifty have degrown, in fact. So that was a phenomenal performance from the Satco PMS, and more specifically, Nitin as a fund manager has done a fantastic job. I'm sure this is going to turn out to be an excellent year. We'll finish very well this calendar year. Of course, COVID has locked us all in, and a lot of economies, a lot of businesses have suffered. But we have performed well. The PMS has performed well, and so have our clients who have been invested during this period. May I wish all of you a very happy Deepavali and a prosperous new year. And we hope to keep coming back to you, giving you the news and views that we have on the portfolio. Thank you, Nitin. Thank you, all the attendees, for being with us this Thursday evening. Bye-bye.
I would just like to thank all our investors for the faith and the support that they've given us through all these years. And we hope that we have been able to justify their faith and confidence that they've given us. I would also like to thank my team and Satco and the entire back office team for their support. And a very, very happy Diwali to all of you.
Goodbye, Fano.